FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey! On April 15th, when you're all out of sword, you got to listen to...
Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
The
FAIRtax
FAIRtax
Guys. And we're going to continue here in a few moments with our series of comparing the current income tax, the fair tax, and the flat tax. And hopefully people are paying attention because, that is supposed to be a rather large issue in this election cycle. But we all know what the politicians' game is. They'll talk a great game and then really leave things as close to the status quo as they can. And we need to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, that's right, because that's what happened in the last Congress. Congressman Dave Camp, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, promised all kinds of work on tax reform, and then nothing got done, nothing. And I do want to make one correction from the last program. I talked about the new co-sponsors for H.R. 25 in the House and the new co-sponsor for S-155 in the Senate, and I mistakenly said that Senator James Lankford was in the House. That was a mistake. Obviously, Senator James Lankford is in the Senate.
Okay, and, well, then you've used up your quota of mistakes for today.
Okay, there go all my mulligans.
Oh, mercy! Just kidding. It happens to everybody on occasion. That's the nature of live radio on occasions. But one thing we want to talk about today, as far as our comparison goes, is the IRS. And before we really get into it, I have got to allow me a little bit of soapbox mode here. It happened again. This was in the news a couple of days ago from when we recorded this thing. Another case of what the IRS calls civil forfeiture. Except this was a man in North Carolina that owns a convenience store. He was there literally minding his own business. IRS agents show up at his door, literally seize his bank account, not charged with anything, certainly not convicted of anything, not even charged with anything yet. No innocent until proven guilty. No warrant signed by a judge. The constitutional prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure right out the window. These guys show up at his place, and just on some bureaucrat's suspicion, they grab this guy's bank account and get away with it. That makes my blood boil.
Over $107,000. Now, this guy runs a convenience store, and as you might guess, there's a lot of cash transactions in a convenience store. You don't go in and buy a gallon of milk and pay for it with a credit card. At least most people don't. So there's a lot of cash transactions and a lot of cash deposits.
Yeah, and quickly what happens is there is a requirement that if you make a transaction with your bank of $10,000 or more, they have to report that to the government. But when they look at that and see that this man had made several deposits just short of that, they said, this looks suspicious. We're going to go down. We're going to go down there and ask him about it. We're going to go down there and grab that bank account from him and make him prove that he's doing nothing wrong. And that's insane. Yeah,
there's no assumption of innocence. You're guilty until proven innocent. And the bureaucrats they have no recompense. I mean, nothing's going to be done to them. However, in this case, the Institute for Justice got involved, and I saw on Fox News that the IRS has backtracked on this particular case, and they have refunded the man's money.
Yeah, but that's only because somebody shined the light on it. How many other cases does that happen that don't make national news and they get away with it?
Hundreds. In fact, between 2005 and 2012, the IRS seized over $242 million for structuring, what they call structuring violations.
Structuring, that's the process of depositing just under the trigger for purporting these things.
Yeah, sometimes it's well under. It might be $5,000 one day and $6,000 the other day. It's a cash business.
Why is the IRS even looking at what you put in your bank to begin with? It's none of their business.
Apparently, they don't have enough to do, because for one thing, they could pay attention to maybe their own little problems. I've got this other report here. Majority of tax law violators at the IRS don't get fired. That's right. Tax law violators at the IRS.
This is people that work for the IRS who don't pay their taxes.
Yes, some Internal Revenue Service employees don't pay their taxes.
Imagine that.
But nearly 2/3 of IRS employees who were willfully tax non-compliant between 2004 and 2013 and were supposed to have lost their jobs received a reprieve from the IRS commissioner, according to a newly released report from the IRS auditor. Some of those employees received performance awards and promotions within a year after being disciplined, the report notes.
So you get a little slap on the wrist, and then you get a nice big boost in the paycheck if you work for the IRS and you're not paying your taxes.
My friends, why are we putting up with this? Why do we tolerate this behavior? The IRS, the folks at the IRS treat us like subjects, not citizens. And this is not what the Founding Fathers had in mind. You look at the Declaration of Independence, it talks about the sovereignty of the individual, all right? Our friends at the IRS seem to have forgotten about all that.
Okay, I have to agree with Mike Huckabee on this. He's been quoted several times using the words criminal enterprise to describe the Internal Revenue Service, and I don't think he's far off. I think he's right on with that. It really is. Because if you or I did some of the things that the IRS does, we'd be in jail.
Oh, yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah. So it's a culture of corruption there.
Of course. And so we have just simply got to get rid of it. Must get rid of the Internal Revenue Service. It is an anathema to free Americans. It would make the Founding Fathers turn over in their graves for sure if they knew what the government was doing to their citizens through the IRS. And back to comparing the current income tax and the fair tax and the flat tax, the current income tax, of course, depends on the IRS. It's got a $12 billion budget, employs over 100,000 people who go out there and harass innocent citizens like that for sure. And the fair tax is the only proposal that just completely gets rid of the IRS, abolishes it from the face of the earth, turns over tax collections to the state, and would leave only a small office within the Treasury Department to receive the revenue back from the states, and the IRS is gone.
It'll be so much simpler than it is now for you, for the federal government. And if you have any comments on this, if you'd like to weigh in on this and suggest other information, contact us at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And, oh, by the way, we should probably introduce ourselves as the world-famous FAIRtax Guys.
Oh, okay.
Right, because we are now on SoundCloud.com.
Ooh.
Which is worldwide. You can pick it up on the internet anywhere in the world. Just search for the FAIRtax Guys. And we have our own YouTube channel. And YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. You, again, just search for the FAIRtax Guys. Either on SoundCloud or YouTube, and you can listen to this program and all of our other programs whenever you want to. You don't have to wait for a particular scheduled time. You pick it up and you listen to it. There's a free app for your smartphone. Download the app, listen to the program. I was listening to our last one on the way to the studio today to do this one. So, the world-famous FAIRtax Guys. Okay. I like that.
All right, let's kind of get back on topic here, talking about the how the IRS fares under the income tax, the fair tax, and the flat tax. Under the income tax, it's...
I like bragging about ourselves.
You like bragging about... All right, we'll let you do that a little bit later on. But say the IRS continues in its current form, probably gets bigger if we retain the income tax. It goes away entirely under the fair tax. What happens to the IRS with the current flat tax proposals?
The flat, well, it stays there, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, because you still need some agency to collect the income tax. That's what the IRS, it's the Internal Revenue Service. And so they stay there. And as we've said before many times, the flat tax won't stay flat for very long. So when the lobbyists start working their magic on Congress and start adding this little exemption and that exception and so forth, the IRS is going to get busy again with all their tax code and all their, court cases and all that. So
yeah, and that stuff's going to start the instant that, but even before the ink is dry on the bill, if the flat tax is ever passed.
Yeah, it's not a good situation. That goes away with the fair tax, of course. All right, the flat tax really doesn't change. Yeah, it might flatten out the code, but as we said before, this happened in the '80s under President Reagan, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And what do we have from 1986 to now? Over 40,000 pages of code added. I don't think that it was a very long-lasting. It was a great idea, but history shows the flat tax will not stay flat very long.
More than one change per day for over 10 years running.
Yeah.
And of course, they're published in the Congressional Record, and that's about it. But nobody ever hears about it. Nobody ever knows about it. Well, I mean, I can't name 3 of them. 3 changes. And there have been thousands upon thousands.
If I went back through all my income tax returns over the past few years, I might be able to come up with a few. But no, they're kind of done in secret.
All right. Let's continue with our comparison here with what the different tax proposals will do to the economy. Now, unfortunately, in today's somewhat highly politicized environment, how well the economy or how poorly the economy is doing sometimes depends on which side of the aisle you sit on. But I think we can come up with some really good hard figures as to how these different tax proposals are going to affect the economy. And, of course, with the current income tax, if you tax something, you get less of it.
Yeah.
If you don't tax it, you get more of it. And the current income tax really has got it backwards in terms of what it rewards and what it penalizes. If you work hard, you build a big business, you make some money, the income tax will come in and grab a share of it away from you. If you don't make good decisions, if you lose money, the IRS says, okay, you can write that off. So good decisions are penalized, bad decisions are rewarded. That's backwards, and that's what we've got with the current system as far as its effect on the economy.
Gee, does that say something about the Congress people that passed these laws?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, Bob is absolutely right. The current income tax taxes savings, it taxes labor, it taxes investment, and it taxes productivity multiple times, creating a disincentive to work, save, or invest. Well, work, saving, and investing is what makes an economy strong. So when you tax those things, like Bob said, you get less of them. I really am waiting for the fair tax to pass to see how this economy just roars back to life. It's amazing. You probably won't recognize it because we have put up with this nonsense for so long, and we need to change that. But yeah, the current income tax penalizes the most important factors for a strong economy. And we need to change that. We need to get rid of this, get this yoke off of our backs. And you don't have to be a business owner. You could be, say, a very successful salesperson out there working for a company selling windows or selling whatever. And you get bonuses for your sales and so forth. And the harder you work and the more sales you make and the better you do for the company, the more you get hammered by the tax code. So
the less you make, the smaller the percentage of what Uncle Sam takes from you gets. It's just backwards.
Yeah.
And you talk about backwards. Let me get a little side note in here as far as having priorities wrong. We've mentioned this before, that I think everybody, regardless of their party affiliation, regardless of what their political ideology is, would agree with the fact that it's a higher priority to feed your family than it is to feed the government. And with the current income tax, they've got that backwards. With the withholding, Uncle Sam steps in, literally tells to everybody that's working, I am your highest priority. You will pay me before you spend a dime on your family. And that's what happens. And that priority is just backwards. And the fair tax gets it right, and the income tax gets it wrong.
That's right. Yep. And you can't make it any simpler than that, Bob.
There's so many things about the income tax and the IRS that just gall my gizzard no end. I mean, we've only got 30 minutes here on this show. So
yeah, we do get animated about this, don't we?
Yeah, and but I tell you what, if you've got a story that you'd like to tell that we could relate on the radio, we can either use your name or not, depending on whether you would like to or not. But send it to the FAIRtaxGuys@gmail.com or post it up to our Facebook page where the world can see it as well. And, of course, if you give us permission to, we would love to tell your story here on FAIRtax Power Radio as well. We've talked to several people that have had really good stories about that.
Yeah, they're good stories. They're kind of...
Well, good stories for if you want to use them as fuel to get rid of the IRS.
It's kind of like watching a burning building. It's a horrible situation, but you can't take your eyes off of it.
Yeah. But a lot of people, well, as long as that doesn't happen to me, I'm not going to worry about it. Now, that is a very, very dangerous attitude to take. Because if we let this 15-headed monster called the Internal Revenue Service continue to exist, sooner or later he's going to come looking for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can see that they've already done this with the civil asset forfeiture.
Oh, that's insane.
Now, as far as the effect on the economy for the flat tax, it, according to our comparison sheet, which, by the way, is available on fairtax.org, eliminates the tax bias against savings and investment, lowers interest rates because apparently there's no tax on interest, on savings, increases productivity, but taxes labor income at a higher rate than capital. Now, when you tax labor, work, then it hurts the economy. So, yes, the flat tax will help to some degree. But as we said, we've seen this movie before, and it wasn't that long ago. And look at the mess we have now. You can use two examples. When the income tax started 102 years ago, it was very small and very flat and grew immensely quickly. And then in 86, when President Reagan got his bill through Congress and flattened out the tax, it started unflattening very quickly. So we've done this. How many times are we going to keep beating our head against the wall and expecting some kind of a different result?
So that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But again, with our comparison that goes on, the fair tax completely untaxes wages. You are not taxed on what you make, whether you work for it, whether you invest for it, when you receive money. I mean, if you win the lottery, Uncle Sam right now is out there with his hand out and gets his cut before the top of it. But with the fair tax, that does not happen. Wages completely untaxed. No taxes at all on savings. No taxes at all on investment. All the things that help the economy are not taxed under the fair tax. And again, that is the only plan under which that happens. And it's the only plan that is really going to send the economy into orbit.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're undoing all the problems of the income tax. And you're doing it essentially overnight when the fair tax goes into effect.
Okay.
I mean, people will know about it in advance, but boy, you can't get any better than that.
Related to the economy, what we're talking about, the international corporations, it's more and more we're having a global economy. American business is competing on an international scale. We talked to our friend Bob Matthews that does parachute equipment. Mm-hmm. Now, you would not think that someone in that business is competing with someone in South America, but he says he is.
That's
of course,
right.
I believe him. It's his business. He knows what he's talking about. But the current income tax on the corporate side of things is the highest in the world.
Yeah, it is.
And people are complaining to high heaven about how these corporations are moving their operations overseas, how they're hiding their money overseas. And, I mean, how in the world can you not expect that to happen when you've got the highest tax rate in the world if you stay here?
There are examples. Some years ago, Ireland realized that they had a very high corporate tax rate, and they reduced it down to, I think, like 15%. And they had an economic boom that was just amazing after that. In fact, I remember that one of my sons was working for a company that based itself in Ireland because of that very factor.
Oh, we've seen many times when the Chrysler Corporation
merged
with Mercedes. It's Daimler, I think. Yeah, it was with Mercedes.
Yep.
They moved their corporate headquarters to Germany because it was a friendlier tax environment.
By 14 percentage points.
By a long way.
Yeah. It became Daimler Chrysler based in Germany instead of Chrysler Daimler based in Detroit. Because of the tax code, our tax code.
And people can wring their hands and complain and talk about these people's patriotic duty to stay in America and provide American jobs. The name of the game is if you're in business, you want to make as much money as you can for your stockholders, for your shareholders, to have money to give to your employees and stuff. It just makes common sense. You want to give as little to Uncle Sam or as little to the taxing authority as you can. And if you can do that by moving overseas, then it just makes economic sense to do it, and that's what's going to happen. So if you want to keep American jobs, American companies in America, you have to make America the business-friendliest place on the planet for that to happen, and the fair tax does that. We've seen survey after survey which says that if the fair tax were law and the corporate income tax rate under the fair tax goes to zero, everybody's income tax rate goes to zero. If that were the case, international corporations have already indicated that they would not only build their next facilities here in the United States and bring all those jobs with them, a lot of them would move their whole corporate headquarters here the same way that some U.S. companies are moving out now.
Yeah, it's just the opposite of what's happening now.
So if we create the most business-friendly climate on the planet, hello, you get economic growth.
Yeah, and, talking about patriotic duty, as Bob mentioned, and I heard this. In fact, a friend of mine mentioned it the other day, and I kind of set her straight on that. What about Congress's patriotic duty to create a business-friendly environment for our country? What about their duty to help businesses, to help people, the citizens of this country? All right? Instead of blaming it on some corporation or something, what about their responsibility? We need the folks in Congress to do the right thing and give us an environment that truly helps business, which therefore will truly help the employees and their wages and truly help the economy of this country.
All right, so we have seen how the current tax, the flat tax, and the fair tax all compare as far as affecting the economy, how they work internationally, what their effect on the IRS is. So if we want to see this happen, how do we make it happen? There is one and only one way to do that, and that is to have a large enough grassroots organization that, as you call them, the Congress critters, will sit up and take notice, because those Congress critters are the ones that decide what the tax code looks like.
That's right.
So if we want this to happen, the single most important thing that you can do is to join Americans for Fair Taxation. That is the national grassroots organization pushing for the fair tax, AFFT. Their website is fairtax.org, and that is the only organization I can think of off the top of my head that lets you decide what your membership dues are going to be.
That's right. You can a student can join for $5 a year. $5 a year. The base enrollment.
And they're really not going to check. If you want to say you're a student, they'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I think so. For anybody else like us, it's $10 a year. They also have a promotion going, the 1040 Club, $10.40 a month. My wife and I have been in that for several years because we want this to happen. But yep, fairtax.org. You can tell them that the world famous FAIRtax Guys sent you.
Uh-huh.
That won't get you anything, but you can tell them.
That the quarter will get you a cup of coffee, won't it?
Yeah.
And something else you can do besides joining AFFT, which you must do, because we do have people in Washington that are talking or cornering these Congress critters and trying to talk to them about the fair tax, convince them that it's a good idea to have it. And the first question they get, well, how many people are you representing? And if you say I represent 200,000 and somebody else says I represent 4 million, which one do you think they're going to listen to?
Yeah, that's right. Numbers speak. Numbers speak loudly. So we really need you to become a member of AFFT. And if you think this fair tax thing is a good idea and you've been listening to our programs and maybe read the book by Bortz and Linder, please ask your friends, neighbors, relatives to become aware of the fair tax. We need millions and millions of citizens demanding the fair tax from their congresspeople, all right, from your congressman or woman. And that's the way it's going to happen. You learn about it, you become somewhat proficient. You don't have to become an expert, all right? You don't have to become a radio host, but you can call or write your congressmen and senators and say, I've studied up on the fair tax. This is very important. The research shows it's going to help. You need to vote in favor of this. You need to become a co-sponsor, or I want to know why.
Okay, well, we need your numbers for sure. And AFFT, of course, just like any other organization that is supporting a cause, it could use a little bit of the grimy green stuff as well. So, but you don't need a whole lot of it. I mean, you can join for $5, $10, $15 a year, and that's an incredible bargain. And what you get in return when the fair tax becomes law is just incredible. And another avenue that we encourage people to use is something called PopVox, POPVOX, and that is a website which actually lets the citizens of this country make their views known to Congress on not just the fair tax, but on any and every piece of legislation that is before the Congress. You can go on there, give them your address, your zip code, just simply so they'll know what congressional district you're in. Then beyond that, when you comment on legislation, when you can say whether you're for it and why, whether you're against it and why. And people have been going on to PopVox, POPVOX.com, and talking about the fair tax, and it enjoys like about a 95% of the people that are commenting on it are in favor of it.
Last time I looked, yeah, H.R. 25, the bill in the House, 95% approval rating. 5% of the people don't like it very well for some unexplained reason. But,
Well, those are called former lobbyists.
we've run into a couple of those.
That's another whole program we'll get into other with some of the stuff that people say about the fair tax that when you break it down, it's just really not the truth. But the Congress critters, I love that term. I think you've got that stuck in my head now. The Congress critters, or at least their staffs, they pay attention to Pop Vox, especially to comments from constituents in their district.
This became important a couple of years ago because Congress people are allowed to bring tablets to the floor of Congress now, iPads and the Kindles and so forth. And so they can look up Pop Vox right there on the floor, hold it up and say, see, I got it right here, whatever. I don't know how they proceed, but anyways. So this type of technology is important, and it gives a congressperson up to the second results of how a particular piece of legislation is doing, not only nationwide, but in their district. It breaks it down for their district, the number of people for, against, comments for and against, and so forth. It's a great website.
And it's free to use.
Free. Absolutely free.
All you have to do is give them your address so they know what district you're in.
Yep.
And then from that on, you can comment on anything and everything. And we've got a couple of minutes left. There are a couple other websites that we need to talk about as well. Congress.gov.
Congress.gov is not as pretty as Pop Vox.
No.
But you can set it up to send, if there's any legislation that you care deeply about, you can set up Congress.gov to send you emails when particular changes. I have it set up to send me an email whenever there's a new co-sponsor in H.R. 25 or S-155.
And those are the two, that's the fair tax.
Fair tax bills in the House and the Senate, yep. And so Congress.gov, like I said, it's not as pretty as Pop Vox, probably because it's done with our tax money. But anyways, and another good website is FAIRtax Nation, which is another bunch of volunteers, strictly volunteers, who are very active in promoting the fair tax. Go to fairtaxnation.com, see what they got going on, sign up for their updates and so forth, because we actually find out a lot of stuff that's going on with the fair tax through FAIRtax Nation before we hear about it from others.
All right, and look us up. Look up the world-famous FAIRtax Guys on SoundCloud.com, YouTube.com as well, and also check out our Facebook page on Facebook as well. Just search for the FAIRtax Guys.
Yeah.
You can put world famous if you want to.
That's
guess
right.
You can find that.
We'll
But
be
anyway,
giving autographs.
Thank you so much for listening. FAIRtax Guys at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com is our email address if you'd like to communicate with us. And until next time, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Say the fair tax, once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming across the U.S.